So, me, 32, female, and my husband, Van, 36, male, got married recently. We've been together for 4 years and we're engaged for the past 8 months. I met him when I was 29 years old. I was working as a manager at a bar and he used to frequently come to the bar as a customer. We struck up a conversation and he asked me out. I refused, and he would keep coming to the bar to find reasons to talk to me. My co-workers would tease me about it and tell me how sweet this was of him. And one day I just decided to give him a chance, and the rest is history. Everything about Van is great. He's sweet, kind, mature, financially independent, and plans all our dates. The only thing I have a problem with is his mother, Naomi. Now, before you judge me, I used to love his mom when I first met her. You see, Van was 13 when his parents split up. His dad, Matt, had been cheating with a female co-worker. As you can imagine, this completely broke Naomi's heart because she and Matt were college sweethearts. Matt begged her to forgive him, saying he had never been with anyone except her, which is why he lost himself and made such a stupid mistake, but Naomi refused and filed for divorce. Of course, what Matt did was horrible, but Van was too young to understand anything and was heartbroken to see his parents split up. His dad got the weekends while he would be staying with his mother during the weekdays for his school. Regardless of what Matt did to break up their family, he was a good father to Van. He would be there for Van, cheering him on for every sports event or meeting, the teachers during parent-teacher meetings. Matt was quite an involved father, and most importantly, he allowed Van to be himself. Naomi, on the other hand, was extremely strict. I don't know, maybe it was because of Matt's cheating, but she had become extremely possessive about Van. Here are some of the things that Van has told me that he wasn't allowed to do. He wasn't allowed to stay out late with his friends. He wasn't allowed to date. He wasn't allowed to join his friends for any picnic or class trips. He wasn't allowed to be near any water bodies. No sleepovers with my friends. When Van had told me these rules, they sounded extremely ridiculous, but Van explained how his mother would justify them by saying that she was lonely without him and that she just wanted to protect him from the rest of the world. As you can imagine, Van quickly realized that he liked staying with his dad more than his mom. Matt never had any of these rules. The only rule he wanted his son, Van, to follow was to not stay out too late and to always share locations with him when he went out with his friends, just in case he was ever in an emergency. Whenever there was a class trip coming up, Naomi would forbid Van from participating, but Matt would enroll his name and would encourage his son to join the trip. This would result in a huge fight between Naomi and Matt, with Naomi threatening to take him to court. If Van wanted to go out with his friends, his mother would refuse, so he would wait for the weekends when he would stay with his dad, so then he could go to concerts with his friends or eat out. When Van started growing into a teenager, he started hating living with his mom because they would have constant fights. She would have a problem with his dressing style, his hairstyle, and his friends. He would spend all day in his room hiding until the weekend when he would be finally free with his dad. When Van turned 17 years old, Matt introduced him to his current wife, Heather. Heather's a sweet person and has always loved Van as her own son. She had faced fertility issues early on, but had to eventually accept that she could never have a child. But when she met Matt, she was pleasantly surprised to know that he had a son. Heather sort of became a second maternal figure for Van, who adored her as well. But this was something that was unacceptable for Naomi. She just couldn't let another woman into her son's life and would have huge fights with Van regarding this. She would try to poison his mind by saying how his dad was probably cheating with this woman while still married and that he should not accept his dad's second wife. This was, of course, not true, since Heather came into Matt's life long after he was divorced and living alone. However, Naomi refuses to accept this and starts to make Matt's life difficult by not allowing him to see Van. Van would excitedly wait for the weekends to come, but Naomi would tell him that he wasn't allowed to see his dad, since there was no guarantee what kind of a woman Heather was, and she couldn't allow him to live with strangers. This, of course, led to a lot of nasty fights between Matt and Naomi because she refused to budge. When Van turned 18, he was finally an adult, and he had been accepted into 2 universities, but his mother had been pressuring him to go to the one near her place so she could drive and see him every weekend. He didn't like that university since it didn't have enough resources in the field he was interested in, and he talked with his dad honestly about it. Matt encouraged him to make a decision regardless of what his mother wanted, but Van was scared of upsetting his mother. In the end, he chose that university, which was far off. This led to another meltdown by Naomi. She started yelling at him about how he was abandoning her and how all men are the same, and she was threatening to kick him out and telling him how she wouldn't be paying for his college fees if he didn't go to the university she wanted him to choose. This led to Van calling his dad for help, and Matt immediately drove over to help pack up Van's things so he could live with him. Van has told me how Naomi kept screaming filthy things at him and his dad, which is the last thing he saw before they drove away. In the end, Van did go to his choice university, and Matt assured him that he would be paying whatever he could for his fees, and for the rest, Van would have to take a small student loan, which would be manageable to be repaid off. When Van went away to college, he stopped meeting or talking to his mom. She would, of course, send him a barrage of texts every day, which would range from apologizing to blaming him for ruining her life. Van has told me that he would miss his mom a lot during college, but didn't want to have to deal with her shit again. Matt would constantly remain in touch with Van, and they would meet up during the holidays. In his second year of college, Van received a call from the hospital, which informed him that his mother had tried to end her life. He immediately called his dad, and they rushed to the hospital. Naomi was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, and was admitted to be supervised for 72 hours. This was a turning point for Van. He broke down that his mother had gone to such lengths and started blaming himself for everything. He has told me how he would sit by his mother's bed asking for her forgiveness and praying for her to recover. When Naomi was discharged, she was prescribed medications. Van promised her that he would never leave her again and kept in constant touch with her. After college, he decided to move back to his hometown so he could live near his mother. He, of course, had his own place, but he was just a phone call away from her in case she ever needed him, which she has since taken full advantage of. Since the incident, Van has always been living in a state of anxiety and guilt when it comes to his mother. He believes that his mother is extremely fragile, and whatever she says to him, he listens even if he doesn't want to. When Van opened up to me about all this, I was, of course, quite sympathetic and understanding. His mother had been going for regular checkups and therapy classes, so I thought she would be doing better. When I met his mother for the first time, she seemed sweet, but would also make subtly weird comments about my height, color, or weight, like how I should lose more weight to keep my man happy, or Van was fairer than me, so hopefully our baby is fair also. She would also say things about Van like how her baby boy deserves the best. Her child should never have to be in the kitchen, or how Van could do so much better than me, but he was choosing to settle. This would, of course, bother me a bit, but I would try to not take it seriously and just let her say whatever she wanted. However, over time, as Van and I have progressed in our relationship, I started noticing the toll Naomi's emotional struggles were taking on Van. She would call him every day in the morning asking if he had a good breakfast. If he ever missed the call, she would keep calling him multiple times until he would pick up. When I moved in with Van, she would even call me just to ask why her son wasn't picking up the call and if I was trying to keep him away from her. He would often cancel dates or leave events abruptly, claiming that his mother needed him because she would call him demanding he visit her because she was not feeling well. If Van was awarded something at work, then for his +1, he had to take his mother instead of me, otherwise she would have a fit. Whenever we wanted to go somewhere for vacation, she would force him to share the location with him, telling him how this would make her sleep better at night. All of this would, of course, make me uncomfortable. I could also sense Van's internal conflict between his desire for a normal life and his commitment to his troubled mother. He didn't want to do everything she demanded, but he was scared that she might again do something drastic. In contrast to his mother, his dad, Matt, was extremely chill. I have met Matt and his wife Heather several times, and both of them are always very welcoming. They would never ask us invasive questions, and Matt was genuinely interested in me without trying to belittle me. I could see some of these good qualities of Matt in Van as well. I guess this is why I stuck by Van. I could see that he was so much more than what his mother had put him through. I understood that he needed therapy as well and would encourage him to talk more, but he always said he was okay. When Van decided to propose to me, which was a complete shock to me, it was one of the happiest days of my life. He had flown my parents and my best friend to our city as a surprise to be a part of our celebration. Matt and Heather were also there and congratulated us profusely. The only person who was missing was Naomi, and Van told me how she was apparently not feeling well. I was honestly glad that she was not there, since I didn't want her to say something uncomfortable in front of my parents, who would immediately start to dislike her. We were all having a good time when Van received a call from the hospital saying that his mother had fallen down the staircase. All of us rushed to be there for her, but Naomi refused to see me or anyone else. She asked that only Van should be allowed to see her in the room, so we all had to wait outside. I felt it was a bit odd, since we had all anyways come to check up on her, but it wasn't the right place to say anything. When Van came out, he informed us that she was going to be okay and that it was a fracture according to the doctor, but she had to stay overnight, so she wanted him to stay with her. Matt immediately told Van that he was happy to stay with his mother since she would basically be sleeping anyways, and that he should take me back home, but Van refused, saying that Naomi wouldn't like it and he didn't want to do anything further by upsetting his mom. Eventually, we all came back home and my parents and best friend helped me clean up. Van had booked hotel rooms for them for the night, but they decided to stay with me. I guess they could all see that I was a bit sad that I wouldn't be spending my night with my fiancé on the day he proposed to me. This should have been my first sign that everything was just going to go downhill after that. Our wedding preparations were overshadowed by what Naomi wanted. She would interfere in what wedding dress I should wear, who our flower girl would be, and the suit Van would be wearing. She had strong opinions on the guest list, the venue, and practically every detail. When it came to our honeymoon, Van and I had long been discussing going to Hawaii, but Naomi kept insisting that we should not be flying so far just for a honeymoon, and that going somewhere nearby was much better. This is when I decided to put my foot down and told her no. Naomi was quite taken aback and told me how it was disrespectful of me to talk to her this way, but I told her firmly that this honeymoon was about me and Van, so we were the ones who would be deciding where we wanted to go. She started crying, hearing this, and telling Van how I was excluding, ignoring, and pushing her away. She blamed me for trying to keep her away from her son, which was so ridiculous. I told her that I had gone with her officiant, her venue idea, her cake idea, and even on what dresses my bridesmaids were allowed to wear. So I was trying my best to listen to her, but I wasn't going to allow her to force us into going for our honeymoon to a place we didn't want to go to. Van torn between his obligations to his mother and his commitment to our wedding, tried to talk with her, but she painted herself as some sort of martyr who was sacrificing her son. Later, I even texted her an apology because I knew how important she was to Van, but she responded by saying that no woman could take her son away from her and that I should learn my place. I immediately showed the message to Van, who called his mother for clarification, but she said how I was trying to plant discord in their relationship and that he should always love and believe her more than me. I found this extremely uncomfortable, so I pointed it out to Van after their phone call, and to my relief, he agreed. He assured me that we would stick to our original plan and go to Hawaii just like we had decided. This brought me immense happiness, as it seemed like Van was finally standing up to his mother, and we could have a honeymoon away from her prying eyes. The wedding went well without any major incidents, however. During the reception, mother-in-law managed to make an entire speech about herself, emphasizing how much she had sacrificed in her life. It felt like a subtle attempt to redirect the attention back to her, even on our special day. But despite this, I chose to focus on the positive aspects and the fact that we were heading to Hawaii soon for our honeymoon. My parents, Matt and Heather, and the rest of the guests had a great time at our wedding, and we danced away all night. On the day of our honeymoon, I woke up excitedly. Van and I got ready for the airport, and I was just so happy. However, when we reached the airport, I discovered that Van had booked himself business class seats while I had economy class. This was news to me, since I would have happily paid for business class. Van had insisted on planning the entire trip himself. Hence, I had assumed he would book our tickets next to each other. When I questioned Van, he told me how he had got a last-minute deal and decided to upgrade his ticket, but couldn't find an empty business class seat for me. I found it a bit suspicious because he kept avoiding my eyes. He told me how it wasn't such a big deal and that it was just a matter of a few hours. I told him if that was the case, then he could fly economy and I would fly business class, since he didn't think it was such a big deal anyway. Van got pissed and kept repeating how I should not be so sensitive and that he would meet me later after the flight. I asked him where he was going, and he told me that he was going to go into the business class lounge. Confused and hurt, I struggled to comprehend the reason behind this discrepancy. My attempts to communicate with him were met with a cold demeanor, leaving me to wait for our flight alone. Honestly, I felt like crying, but I didn't want to start our honeymoon depressed, so I went to the washroom to freshen up. Then I sat down in the waiting area until it was time to board our flight. I called Van several times, but he didn't pick up my call, so I grew even more suspicious. I felt it in my gut that something just wasn't right. Then I received a call from mother-in-law, which was unexpected since she never called me unless she was trying to get in touch with Van. I picked up the call to let her know that Van would call her back in a few minutes, but mother-in-law started asking me questions about where I was, which was odd since she could have guessed I was at the airport. I told her that I was waiting for my flight, but then she started asking specific questions like if I was waiting near this cafe or the lounge. I was already frustrated about what Van had done, and I had no patience left for mother-in-law's mind games, so I straight up asked her what it was that she wanted. She hesitated and then, in her usual taunting tone, started saying how I should not lose my cool, but that she was coming for our honeymoon also. I lost my cool at that moment and yelled at her if she was joking. Naomi told me how she just wanted to be close to him and didn't want him to fly so far away from him, so she had convinced him to let her fly with us. I was so angry by that point that I just cut her call short and walked to the business lounge. The security didn't want to allow me in, but I informed them that my husband was inside and I needed to inform him something really urgent about his mother, but he wasn't picking up my calls. After a lot of persuasion, the security escorted me inside so I could talk to my husband. I was shocked to see Van sitting and scrolling through his phone, which meant that he had his phone with him the entire time and was knowingly ignoring my calls. I walked towards him and he looked up in surprise to see me with security. He asked me if something was wrong, but I questioned him if it was true that mother-in-law was coming for our honeymoon. Van looked at me frozen in shock. I questioned him if this was why he had booked a separate ticket for me so I wouldn't find out since he was flying for our honeymoon with his mommy. Van got red in his face and people around us started staring and whispering. Even the security guy was invested in our fight. This is when mother-in-law walked into the lounge with her head turning everywhere, probably looking for Van. When she looked at us, she stopped dead in her tracks. I told Van how his mother had called me to inform me about his plans. Hearing this, Van tried to explain to me how he had originally booked tickets just for us in economy, but Naomi kept crying and pleading with him. So in an attempt to keep both of us happy, he decided to book separate tickets so I would never find out. He told me how he had booked a completely different hotel for mother-in-law, so she was never even going to bother us. Mother-in-law came up to us and, as usual, tried to interfere. She told me how I should be happy that her son loved her so much and it wasn't a big deal if she was coming along, since she had never been so far away from her son. I was losing my shit at this point, and if it wasn't the airport, I would have ripped her hair out. Instead, I had to remain dignified, so I yelled at my husband loudly, saying that I was embarrassed of marrying a child who could not go anywhere without his mother tagging along with us, and how he seemed more like her husband than her son. Van started whispering how I was trying to embarrass him in front of affluent people, and how we could have this conversation later in Hawaii. I laughed in his face and told him that he could have fun on his honeymoon with his mommy, since I was done with this marriage. Mother-in-law and Van looked at me wide-eyed in shock as I walked out. I tore my tickets in half and booked a cab home. Ultimately, Van also decided not to go and rushed back home and started to berate me how I had no right to talk to him that way and how he did what he thought was right. He told me how mother-in-law had to fly out alone since she didn't want to waste her ticket. I just locked myself in the bathroom so I could cry because I couldn't bear to see his face. This all happened yesterday and I have been in a daze ever since. I clearly know that our marriage is over because neither is my husband asking me for forgiveness, nor is he talking to me, which really hurts me. Walking out of this marriage is a huge deal when just 3 days ago I was looking forward to spending the rest of my life with him. This is why I'm on Reddit. AITA for leaving my husband after he wanted to bring his mother for our honeymoon. Update 1. Wow, thank you everyone so much for all the hundreds of comments and DMs I've received. When I wrote this, I didn't think I would have so many internet strangers reaching out to me and offering comforting words. I have gone through all your comments and I agree with some of you that I need to have one last discussion with my husband regarding this. If my husband continues to support his mother, then I will have no choice but to end our marriage since I can't keep fighting with him about this our entire life. Naomi clearly doesn't care about us since she had the audacity to fly to Hawaii alone when she knew this all happened because of her. I will update you once we discuss this. Update 2. It has been a month since my last update and a lot has happened since then. After my last update, I decided to take a bold step. The situation was too overwhelming and I couldn't let it linger without a proper confrontation. So I packed up my bags, determined to have a conversation with Van when he returned from work. The conversation could either break our marriage or make it better. When Van walked through the door and saw me waiting for him, a mix of surprise and concern flickered across his face. I told him to sit down, offered him a glass of water. The tension in the room was palpable. We hadn't been communicating since the incident, as he still felt like I owed him an apology. Taking a deep breath, I decided to open up about everything right from the start. How his mother had made me feel from the beginning of our relationship. I detailed how I noticed the change in his behavior when she was around and how he seemed to transform into a different person around her. I acknowledged the guilt he carried in his heart due to his mother's past, the sacrifices she claimed to have made for him, and how it has slowly eaten away at the foundation we had built. Tears welled up in my eyes as I expressed how difficult she had made my life with her constant interference, not just in our wedding, but also in our honeymoon. I poured out my feelings, explaining that I fell in love with him for his kindness and sweetness, but the dynamic with his mother was eroding what we had. I cried as I spoke, laying bare the emotional toll it had taken on me. As I reached the end of my speech, I noticed that Van, too, had tears streaming down his face. It shocked me to see him break down like this. He began to speak, expressing that he had no idea I had been feeling this way since the start of our relationship. He confessed how he had grown accustomed to taking care of his mom all his life, always living in fear that something bad might happen to her. His tears flowed uncontrollably as he shared the constant internal struggle he faced. He told me how he had become so conditioned to always take care of her and put her needs above everyone else that he didn't know how to come out of it. He explained how he knew that bringing his mother on the honeymoon was wrong, but she had guilt-tripped him and he had caved, thinking it was the best course of action just to keep her happy. I pointed out to him that if his mother had really wanted to be near him, then she would not have gone to Hawaii and stayed behind for him. He nodded and told me that he had been blind to see all her manipulations until now. The weight of his emotions became apparent as he went down on his knees, apologizing to me repeatedly. And this broke my heart, and I hugged him, understanding the immense suffering he had endured. It became clear that this man needed counseling, and as long as he recognized his faults and was willing to work on it, I was ready to go through this marriage with him. In the following 2 weeks, Van made an appointment and began seeing a therapist. He also had a heartfelt conversation with his dad regarding all of this. Matt had no idea about the incident and was taken aback that Naomi had caused all of this. His dad echoed the same sentiments I had shared and told Van how it was time for him to stop worrying about his mother and live his life unapologetically. With the guidance of his therapist, Van has decided to go low contact with his mother, recognizing the need for space to sort out his thoughts. But this is going to be a very difficult decision since mother-in-law keeps calling him all the time. He hasn't told her about the therapist, but she's definitely going to flip out. He plans on telling her this coming weekend to give him space, and if she refuses, then he will have no choice but to block her. Overall, I think this has been a significant development, the right step towards healing our relationship. I understand that the journey won't be easy, but for the first time it feels like we are moving in the right direction. Update 3. 3 months have passed since my last update, and I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has been following my story and offering support. It's been a roller coaster of emotions, and I appreciate the encouragement from this community. Firstly, Van did have a conversation with his mother after the talk with his therapist. As expected, it didn't go smoothly. She unleashed a barrage of accusations, screaming and yelling at him, blaming me for taking him away from her. She insisted that he should divorce me, claiming that I was the reason for their strained relationship and that they were so much happier before me. However, Van finally put his foot down. He firmly informed her that he would not tolerate her manipulative behavior any longer. He made it clear that she needed to respect our relationship and boundaries. After delivering this ultimatum, Van took a decisive step. He blocked his mother from his phone. I did the same as well. This move was necessary for both our sanity and the health of our relationship. Naturally, his mother then began to complain to anyone who would listen about being abandoned by her son and how terrible her daughter-in-law was. The gossip and rumors did get back to us from various acquaintances and family members, but we remained resilient and focused on our own happiness. Matt, Van's dad, has played a crucial role during this time. He has stepped in occasionally to check up on Van's mother, ensuring she was doing okay and taking her medications regularly. Since cutting ties with his mother, Van has experienced a notable improvement in his emotional well-being. The cloud of anxiety and guilt that had lingered over him before is no longer present. We have started going out for date nights without the constant interruption by incessant calls from his mother, creating an environment where we are able to truly enjoy each other's company. As for what happened to our honeymoon, Van decided to fix things and surprise me with a trip to Hawaii. This time we both flew business class together and finally having the peaceful and romantic getaway that we had envisioned. It was a wonderful vacation that allowed us to strengthen our bond and create positive memories together. Overall, I do feel a sense of happiness and optimism for our future. Despite the challenges, my husband's growth and commitment to our relationship have been evident. If there are further developments, I'll be sure to update you all. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.